Hello guys, welcome back. This is Pro John Mandona, your online tutor in science. So we're going to continue from where we ended. But before we actually proceed, I want us first to hit that subscribe button so that we can receive the latest videos, the latest tutorials that you may require as you study. So we're going to proceed in biology. But today's lecture is actually going to focus on one topic, which is based on living organisms. So let us dive in as we explore. So what is a living thing? What is a living organism? We're supposed to know what a living organism is. A living organism is actually defined as an organism that possesses life. But there is actually no actual way we can define a living organism. Okay, but the only way that we can define it is it's actually we can define it based on its characteristics. And what are those characteristics? Or let me say, to conclude, we can say a living organism is an organism that can move, reproduce, excrete, and feed, and other characteristics that we're going to mention. Examples of living organisms are plants, animals, insects, and a lot more that we can discuss. So now let us dive in to explain the characteristic of a living organism. Why? Because we need to know how can we identify that this organism is living and this is not living. The only way we can identify is by explaining its characteristics. Okay, the first characteristic that we are going to discuss is reproduction. Reproduction is known to be a process by which living organisms produce offspring of their kind. And one thing that you're supposed to know is that every living organism actually carries out this process of reproduction. Uh, Another characteristic that we're supposed to know is feeding or nutrition. Nutrition is defined as the intake of nutrients into the body for metabolism maintenance. So every organism actually carries out this process of nutrition. Every organism actually feeds in order for it to maintain its maintenance, and you're going to find that for it to survive, it actually needs to carry out the process of nutrition. So no wonder we always eat different foods, because those different food actually contain different nutrients that are going to enable the build-up of an organism and enabling it to survive. The other characteristic that we're supposed to know is what we call excretion. Excretion is defined as the removal of waste products, which are toxic substances, from the bloodstream. Every living organism actually has to excrete in order for it to survive. The human body actually removes carbon dioxide as an excretory product from respiration, because carbon dioxide is very toxic. If it remains in the body, it might destroy some certain tissues that enable organisms to respire. So hence it has to be removed. The other characteristic that we're supposed to know is that it is the process of respiration. Every organism carries out this process. It is defined as a release of energy by the breakdown of glucose by oxygen. So glucose will be burnt in oxygen, and as oxygen burns glucose, energy will be produced, and energy is used in to carry out the processes that we have mentioned. Like for example, reproduction, we need energy. Feeding, energy is used. Excretion, energy is used as well. Respiration can also be defined as the inspiration or inhalation of air and exhalation or expiration of air, taking in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide, in simple terms to say. The other characteristic that we're supposed to know is sensitivity or irritability. Organisms are actually sensitive to stimuli, and they are able to respond. So everything that is regarded to be a living organism is sensitive to a stimuli. How do organisms sense the sun? So if it is too hot, the body will actually sense, and as the body senses that it is too hot, it will find a way, a mechanism at which the body can respond to that stimuli. So if it is hot as human beings, if at all we put in a hot environment, what will happen to human beings? The human being will start to sweat. This is symbolizing to say that it is responding to the hot environment the organism is in. The other characteristic that we should know is movement or locomotion. Movement is defined as a displacement of an organism from one position to another. So what actually happens here is that for plants, movement is somehow strict. How? Because they do not move physically. The entire body does not move from one position to another. Come on, what would happen if you see a tree running? Wouldn't you just freak out or something? So that's why for a plant, its movement is somehow strict, but its movement has only in certain areas of the roots or of the plant tip. But whereas for animals, its movement is not restricted, which means that it can move from one position to another through walking or running. The other characteristic that we should know is growth. Growth is actually defined as the increase in both the size and the mass of an organism. Both plants and animals do grow. So for a plant, it will grow from a seedling or from a seedling, and then it grows to a full-grown plant. And for an animal, it will grow from an infant until it is grown to a full-grown man or woman. One thing that you should know is that cells is also a characteristic of a living organism. It is true because a living organism contains living cells. Dead organisms do have dead cells though, so there's somehow a question like that. But it is accepted and it is true. Cells is part of a characteristic of a living organism. Because some non-living do not even have cells at all. So now, after knowing that, we are supposed to know differences of living organisms and non-living organisms. A simple way you can actually mention the differences is by knowing the characteristics of a living organism and then counteracting it with non-living organism. How? All living things carry out these characteristics that we have mentioned, but non-living things do not carry out any of those characteristics. So, for example, living things can move whereas non-living things cannot move. A plant and a stone, which one can move? A plant can move. Or an animal with a stone, an animal can move and a plant cannot. Living organisms respire whereas non-living organisms do not. So what's happening here? Uh, Living organisms actually carry out the process of respiration, whereas non-living organisms do not carry out this process. So therefore, that's a difference as well. Living organisms do reproduce, they carry out the process of reproduction, whereas non-living organisms do not carry out this process. A stone cannot, I'll still base an example to a stone. A stone does not carry out the process of reproduction. It won't reproduce. Living organisms do excrete, whereas non-living organisms do not. That's also another thing. Living organisms feed, whereas non-living organisms do not feed at all. Living organisms grow, whereas non-living organisms do not grow. Are there any more remaining? Oh, I think that's all. Thank you for watching, guys. I really enjoyed lecturing this video to you. I hope you have actually understood, and thanks for watching. And please, before you actually leave, I want you to subscribe. Please subscribe. Thank you very much. I love you guys.